Hello everyone, this is Bamadele from Delaware Studios. You're welcome to another episode of Android Programming. We'll be talking about the Android user session. We'll be focusing majorly on shared preferences. You should be familiar with shared preferences by now. You might not have been using it in the course of your application, but I'll explain what shared preferences actually means and give examples of applications that you would have been using that used a lot of shared preferences in the course of keeping the user session. You would have been familiar with applications like Facebook, Twitter, their mobile application on Android and even on iOS, in which once you log in, even you switch off your mobile or you take away your data, you still have your user. Once you log in back or once you put up your mobile phone and you launch the application, the user state is still maintained. That is being done with the use of shared preferences in Android. Okay, what is shared preferences? Shared preferences is an API from Android SDK to store and retrieve application references. Shared preferences are simply sets of data values that stored persistently. When you say persistently, it means that data you stored in the shared preferences are still existing, even if you stop the application or turn off the device. So I'll be going straight to my Android Studios where I develop a sort of user login and password whereby you log in into an application and the state of the login will still be kept. That is our major focus. So that in the sense whereby you put off the application or you put up your device, once you launch the application back, that state will still be kept until you log out from the application. So that is very good for a robust application, so that the user won't continually log in username and password every time an application is being launched. Okay, I have my directory to the built application. I'll talk about the XML firstly, the activity login. This is the first UI of the application, whereby it's a linear layout. The width and height is being matched by the parent. It has a text view that says enter the username. I've coded a username to be used, which is admin. For the course of this application, you can develop with probably having a user a login, a register and a login. I've done that in my previous application. Or you can decide to store username, password into a database on the server on the fly using APIs. But for the purpose of this application, we are focusing majorly on shared preferences, how to keep the state of the login. Okay, there is an edit text whereby you have the access to put in your username, and also another text view for the password, and the edit text also, which is like an input field for your password. And you have a button to actually click and to give you login into the next session of the application, which has an ID called button login. Okay, let's get to see the activity main, which is the activity that launches after you might have logged in with the admin and admin. Okay, there's a text view which has a few parents, and it's a single line, which is true, which is just a straight line, which is just going to populate the name of the user. And also another text view that's going to show the email. It's just coded, so that you can see the next activity that launches after a user might have logged in into the application. And there's a button which actually gives a logout. It has an ID called button logout. Okay. Okay, the button which actually logs out the application, it has an ID of btn logout. Okay, all these ID will be used in the course of the application logic, where we are going to be talking about that in the Java classes. Okay, I have three major Java classes here: the login activity, the main activity, and the user session manager. The main activity is the default activity, which I'll first of all talk about. It extends activity, as we all know, and we declare the user session manager class, which is the user session manager, giving it the name session, and also a button called button logout, which we actually talked about in the XML. Okay, we have an onCreate method, the normal onCreate method that scores on the super class, and also set the content view to the layout of the activity main, which is the default activity. The session class instance, which is the first, we call on the session, we create a new session from that, a new user session manager, and we get the application context method to be attached to that. So we have a text view, the LB name, and the LB email, which is actually going to display in the activity main, okay, not the login now. Okay, we're going to find the view by ID from the XML from the activity mail for the LB name and for the LB email. I'll quickly show you this. The LB email, this ID, and also this ID for the LB name. Okay, and we're going to call on the logger button, which you all know that it's over here, the ID btn logout. Okay, so we're going to set a toast to get the application context, set the username, login status, and concatenate it with the session if it's logged in, and we get the toast length and we show it up to the screen. Okay, so we're going to check user login. If user is not logging, this will redirect the user to login activity. Okay, but if user is logging, it's going to maintain this particular state of UI. Okay, if session is being checked to login method, you finish it up, we're going to get user data from session. We map generic string, calling on the user and getting the user details method. We get the name and we're going to get the email, okay, which is being encoded it's been encoded into the application. So we're going to show user data on activity, calling on the LB name key and the email. We're going to set a text to it with HTML format, the name and the name attribute, and also concatenate the email attribute with the email ID. Okay, so on button logout, we set an on-click listener to that, whereby the session is going to log out the user. You're going to clear the user session data and redirect the user to the login activity. So this, talking about this login activity for a while, let's see what this login activity is actually. Is majorly the major focus of this application. Okay, the login activity extends activity where we have the button, which is the button login. This is like it's going to come out in the form of the username and password, where we're going to put our username and password. So there should be an ID that's going to attach to this, and going to use this ID in the course of the logic. Okay, we have the edit text, which is the text username, which I can quickly show to you in the activity login. The text username, that should be up. Okay, the text username. All right, we'll be using this. We'll be using the ID to the text password and also the button login in this course of this logic. Okay, now the user session manager, as we declared in the main activity, is the user session manager. We'll give it an identifier called session, and the onCreate method, which is always there, overriding from the super class. We set the content view to the activity login XML, the user session manager, just like the way we did for the main activity. You instantiate the user the session with the user session manager, and you get the application context attached to it as well. You get the email, the password, and the input text, calling on the text username, the text password, and you call on the ID of the text username and text password by getting the content of it and passing it into the a variable called text username and text password. That's just what that's doing. And there's a toast message to get the application context, whereby it spit out user login status plus the session if it's logged in, and the toast length long, and also show it out. So we'll be talking about the user login now. When you click on the login button, okay, there's going to be an on-click listener set onto this for the login button click event. Okay, this is going to get the username and password from the edit text. Yes. So the string is going to be passed in the string format, and we're going to validate if username and password is filled. Now that's the first level of validation. You should be familiar with this. Even in web, in mobile, you validate input data as fields, so that dummy data won't be passed in and it can't be used by hackers or something. So a good validation is very needed there. We actually validate to get to get if it's filled, if it's not empty. So username, we call on the trim method of in the Java, in the Android API, and getting on the length if it's greater than 0, and the password and the length is greater than 0. Yes, that's a test. For testing purpose, username and password is checked with static data just for the dummy. Use a dummy wrap-up. You can decide to make this more robust, thereby once it's going to be testing from the database, and there's going to be a sort of register login whereby you register and it saves in the database. I've done that in my previous lesson, but I'll be focusing on the user session. Okay, so we did a test that if the username is equals to admin and the password is equals to admin, so it must be accoded. Continue. Now we'll create a user login session, statically storing the name, and example, and also the email. Okay, the session create user login, which is going to be the user session. Okay, and also the message that is going to be spelled out if the admin is being imputed as the username and also the password. Okay, these are the message, the user session, and the email. These are just what will be spelled out in the login UI, the activity login. Okay, so we are going to be starting the main activity, which is an intent to another class. Okay, this is going to actually call on the main activity now. So the first default activity is always going to be the main activity, which is going to check that is there a user logged in. So if not, it redirects back to the login activity. But if there's never been any login, it redirects, as I've said. But if there's been a login, it keeps reference to the main activity. Okay, so we're going to add a new flag to start a new activity and calling on this. So if else, probably you input a wrong username and password, there's going to be a message that is going to be gracefully shown that username and password is incorrect. Okay, so any other things, if user didn't enter username and password, that is, if there's no username and password, it's going to show there's going to be a toast message that please enter username and password, and the application can continue. Okay, there's one Java class logic I really want us to understand here, which is the user session manager. This is what is actually keeping the session. This is where shared preferences are being used. Okay, this is a class called user session manager, and we declare the shared preferences reference. Shared preference, we give it pref. We have the editor reference for shared preferences, give it editor. We have the context underscore context. So we have the shared preference mode, which is an integer in a private mode. It's been declared already, giving it 0. And we have the shared preference file name, whereby we have a private static final string, giving it a prefer name. Okay, we give it Android example pref. Okay, that's the preferred name. We give the shared pref. We have the all shared preferences keys. If it's also in a string, is user login, we give it is user login. We all use this in the course of the Java class, if you can remember. So we have the username, which we also give it a key name called name, and the email. Okay, there is a constructor here of the user session manager, which holds on to the context objects. Okay, this we concatenate it with the context equals to the context, and also the pref equals to the underscore context. We get the shared preferences, we get the preferred name and the private mode declared earlier. In the editor, we add the pref to the edit method. There's a create login session, whereby there's a void, which is the create user login session. Okay, this is going to create the user login session, calling on the name and also the email. They are all in a string data type. We're going to store the login value as true, so we'll call on the editor, and also we put the boolean, which is user login. If it's user login, it's going to be true. So we're going to store the name in pref2. We call on the editor as well. We pull the string, the key name, which we declared earlier, which is the name. So we're going to store the image just like the way we did for the name, and we have to commit the editor change. So we're going to check login method, which is going to, we're going to know the status. If false, it will redirect user to the login page. Else, it's going to do nothing. We're going to keep on that because there's a session. So this is where the logic comes in. So there's a check login method. Okay, it's going to check login status. If it's not, no, if this is not, this user login, okay, user is not logging, we directed him to the login activity if the user is not logged. So it's going to call on the intent of the login activity of class, thereby because the session has been kept. Okay, we're going to close all activities from start, calling on the I, which is the intent. We add a flag, the flag activity cleared up. We add a new flag to start new activity if user is not logging. Okay, we're going to start login activity. Okay, that's if it's not logged. Else, you return false. You keep to the state. Okay, you get stored with session data using the hash map, the string data type, and you get the user details. You use hash map to store user credentials. We're going to store the user. We're going to store the name. We're going to store the email ID. So this is going to return the user. Okay, and thereby we're going to clear the session details when there is a logout, because once there is a logout, the session must be cleared. So it must be like, okay, there's no session already, take us to the login activity. Clear your user data from shared preferences. There's going to be an editor. That editor is very important. You clear and you also commit. After logging, we direct user to login activity. So when you log in or when you launch the application, it directs you back to the login activity because the session has been cleared. There has been a logout. The user has logged out of the application. I think this logic is very, very simple and understandable. I want you to put more focus on the user session manager class, which is going to allow you to use the shared preferences I'm really talking about here, so that you will be able to keep the state of the user login in any application. You call on the necessary details used, which is the username, the password. We talk about the editor, and we talk about the shared preferences, which we declared earlier. Yeah, the context, the editor, and the friend. Okay, without much ado, I'll launch this application for you to see, so that you'll be able to understand what we are really talking about here. Okay, click on my run button. I have the state here. Okay, now I've coded this. That is for admin and admin, definitely, because once you put on something different, it's not going to accept that. Okay, I'm gonna click on admin. Admin. Okay, login. It takes you to the main activity. Okay, which is a welcome screen, the user session, email, my email. Okay, if you are working on this and you decide to just switch up the application by not you didn't log out, just close the application. Okay, after closing the application, and this is an emulator anyway, but I'll still do it by running again. You can test it in a real device anyway, but it's going to maintain the state. Despite that I've closed the application, it's not going to start all over. It's going to maintain the session. Okay, so I decided to run the application again so that you will see that the session will still be kept. Okay. Alright, let me put this to foreground, okay, so that we'll be able to see what we're talking about here. Can you notice this? User login status true. That's the purpose. That's why the fact that I ran it from the application development, the IDE. Okay, that is what I'm talking about here. So for you to override this session, you simply log out. Once you log out, the session has been cleared and it's going to come back to its normal state. Okay, thank you very, very much, my good listener, for hanging out with me on this tutorial. it is very, very, very useful how to actually use share preferences to keep user login sessions. It can be, it may not be only login, it can be other things. So you really want to keep the session going, even if the user decides to put off the application or decide to kill the application, it's still going to keep the session. Thank you very much for listening once more, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Have a wonderful day. Bye bye.